The leader of Iran's Islamic Revolution has once again called on the nation to take part en masse in the upcoming presidential and city council elections. Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei says strong participation will discourage enemies, force them to ease their pressures, and seek a different approach towards Iran. The leader expressed satisfaction with the run-up to the June 14th vote and said what people want is the rule of the law. The leader says people were the ones that paid the price back in 2009 when some political currents broke the law after the 10th presidential election. Ayatollah Khamenei says even if some individuals don't support the Islamic establishment, they have to support their country by taking part in the vote. Ayatollah Khamenei says if the next president wins the election with a majority of votes, he'll have a stronger position when dealing with enemies. Well, Wednesday, as we said, is the last day of campaigning for the Iranian presidential election. 6 presidential candidates are wrapping up their final day of campaigning in the run-up to Friday's election. The following report takes a look at the month-long campaign trails.
The campaigns by the 6 candidates have been marked by extensive political advertising, big-picture efforts, high-profile rallies across the country, as well as passionate pleas and promises.
The next cabinet members should be experienced individuals. They should also seek help from young talents to move the country forward.
Every province should run its own business. This includes public welfare and social security, but they should also be held to account and report to the central government in Tehran.
Just as we stood against arrogant powers, we can also fix the existing issues on the domestic front. This includes fighting corruption, curbing inflation, and creating new jobs.
No one knows for sure who the clear favorite is or who will come up short. Under the election law, the presidential candidate has to obtain more than 50% of the votes in the initial round to win outright. If no one manages to achieve this, the 2 top candidates will face each other in a second round runoff a week later.
If I win, I promise to create an epic economic event. But I can only do this if you take part in the election en masse and create an epic political event.
In the next administration, we will save the economy from its current state. We will revive ethics and forge constructive relations with the world.
We don't want to show a clenched fist if the West is willing to normalize ties. They are better off doing away with sanctions.
Iranians have just 1 day of quiet before they choose a president on Friday. Over 50 million are eligible to vote, of which nearly 1.6 million are first-time voters. The nationwide campaigns showed that everyone's excited and energized about the prospect of making history. They are replacing President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad with a new chief executive, who will be the president of one of the most influential and energy-rich nations on earth. Qamar Naderi reporting for Press TV.
Hundreds of reporters from around the globe are in Iran to cover the country's presidential election due this Friday. The Guardian Council's spokesman talked to Iranian and foreign reporters about the event. Arash Kharatbari has more.
Everything in place for Iranian and foreign media reporters to cover Iran's presidential election on this Friday. On threshold of the election, a spokesman of the Guardian Council, the body that has vetted the presidential candidates and will supervise the elections, talked to reporters in Tehran. Most questions were about the form of the election, how and when the results will be announced.
The preliminary results of the election will be announced by the Interior Ministry. It is not for me to say when they will announce it. The Guardian Council must authenticate the results and announce it after all the complaints are reviewed. The process can take place between 7 to 10 days according to the Article 79 of Iran electoral laws.
Also rejecting the idea of presence of international observers, he stated,
people believe that international observers coming to Iran would be an insult to them, and it is not acceptable.
The head of Iran's Foreign Reporters Bureau of Ministry of Culture says that the number of foreign reporters for covering the presidential election has increased around 15% compared to the past presidential race 4 years ago.
Around 430 reporters representing 190 different media from 40 countries are here to cover the presidential election.
Expressing satisfaction with the Iranian government cooperation, foreign media reporters talked about people's desire to participate in the election.
We saw good cooperation and interactive between reporters and Iranian authorities about Iranian election. We're ready for coverage.
I saw the most desire of people to vote.
The candidate who gets absolute majority of the votes becomes president, and if not, a runoff will be held on June 21st. The presidential election will be concurrent with the city and rural council election on June 14th. With two presidential candidates, Haddad Adel and Aref, leaving the race days before Election Day on Friday, the 6 remaining candidates have until Thursday morning to run their campaigns and inform people of changes they are going to make if elected president. Arash Khalatari, Press TV, Tehran.
Presidential candidate Mohammad Baqir Ghalibaf has promised to fix the economy and develop both cities and rural regions from his first day in office if he wins the June 14th vote. Tehran's mayor says all previous administrations used oil revenues to develop only cities and towns with little or no attention to deprived regions. Ghalibaf says this policy will change for good as soon as he's elected president. The principlist candidate says he can only deliver on his campaign promises if everyone takes part in Friday's elections to create yet another epic political event. Reformist candidate Hassan Rouhani has said if he becomes president, he will safeguard the country's nuclear rights with minimum costs.
Access to a peaceful nuclear program is our inalienable right, just like many other rights. People have the right to development and growth, and security and welfare. They have the right to ease the effects of sanctions and resist outside pressures, but they have also the right to have normal relations with the outside world.
In a Q&A session on TV, the presidential candidate said his administration will pay great attention to Iran's nuclear program. He said Iran has no intention of deviating from the civilian nature of its nuclear activities. Rouhani also pledged to deal with Iran's high unemployment rate if elected president. Principlist candidate Ali Akbar Velayati says it's a strategic mistake to limit Iran's relations with the European Union. He says a better and safer option is to expand bilateral ties with the EU as well as its member states at the same time.
The worst possible policy is to only have relations with the EU as a whole. We should have ties with the European Union, but at the same time expand bilateral ties with its members. Otherwise, if one member state decides to sever ties with Iran, the whole Union will follow suit.
The presidential candidate said Iran has had bilateral ties with some European countries for centuries, and it can use this background to give a new breath of life to its relations with the EU. According to the principlist candidate, Tehran should also reform its relations with the EU member states based on mutual interests and respect. Well, the latest opinion polls show that Iran's presidential election will go to a runoff. If no candidate receives 50% of the vote in the first round, a runoff will be held on June the 21st. In the second round, the candidate with the most votes will be the winner. And if the Guardian Council approves the election results, a process that takes between 7 and 10 days, he will be the next president. And of course, as always, for more news and updates on Iran's upcoming presidential election, you can also log on to our website, presstv.ir, where you can find a special section devoted to the presidential vote. Press TV has been and will be covering this year's election news with plenty of facts and figures and, of course, useful information about Iran's election process. Be sure to check that out.